In this section, we're going to take a look at one more example using streams. This example is going to be much more closely related to what we're trying to achieve back inside that login application we were working on before. So let's take a look at a quick mock-up. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to show enter your email. Underneath that, we'll show a text input. So a user is going to type in here, and if they type in something that is not an email address, we'll show a validation message right underneath it that says, hey, sorry, but that is an invalid email. Now we're going to use the same rule for valid emails as we did before. Essentially, if a user just puts in an @ symbol, we'll consider it to be a valid email. Not the best validation rule in the world, but it's at least good enough for right now. So if a user enters in the @, then I want to hide that message. Okay, so this is going to be a lot of fun because this is going to be a use of streams that's going to be very closely related to what we're trying to achieve back with that login form. So to get started, I'm going to flip back over to Dartpad. I'm going to clean up the code inside of my main function, and then I'll flip over to the HTML tag, and we'll do a little bit of work over here. So I'm going to add on another H4. I'll say enter your email. I'll put an input underneath that, and then to hold that validation message, I'm going to make a div with a style of color :red, like so. Now I'll close the div off, but I'm going to leave it empty. So a div exists underneath our text input right here, but it by default has nothing inside of it. But if we start to add text, then it's going to show up as red. So eventually we want to essentially get some content inside this div that says something like enter a valid email. That's our goal. Okay, so we're going to have to look at every time a user types inside of here. We're going to have to somehow process that, and then if it's invalid, add some text to the div. So let's get to it. I'm going to flip back over to the Dart tab, and I'll first begin by using the HTML library to get a handle on this HTML input element. So I'll make a HTML element. We're going to call this thing input element. I'll give it a name of input, and that's going to come from query selector input, like so. Now we're going to also eventually need a reference to the div right here so we can add some text inside of it. So I'll take care of that right now. I'm going to get a div element. I'll call it div. I'll be query selector with div, like so. Now just so you know, to add text into a div, we can write out div.inner HTML. Notice the capitalization on inner HTML here, and we can just set that equal to some string like enter a valid email. So now if I run this, we'll see in red underneath the input, yep, there we go, enter a valid email. So just so you know, that's how we add some text inside there. Okay, so now we need to somehow hook into this input and watch for every time a user types a new letter into it. So to watch for input from a user, we're going to write out input.onInput. So just like the onClick thing tied to the buttons we were working with previously, onInput right here is a stream of event objects. And this event object describes the event that just occurred, or kind of what the user just typed into this input right here. Now to get started, let's try just console logging out this event object that comes through and get a better idea of what we're working with. So I'm going to add on a listen. It's going to receive that event object, and I'm just going to print out this event thing. So let's try running this and now seeing what happens when we add some text into the input. Okay, so notice how my console is empty right now. If I go back over to my input over here and start typing, I get instance of event. So this event argument right here is of type event. If you come from the world of JavaScript or web development at all, you might know that to get the actual value of the input right here from an event object, we reference event.target.value. So this right here, this is not a Dart thing at all. This is a normal JavaScript and web development kind of thing. To access the value of the input right here, we reference the target.value property. Now you'll notice that we get a message down here saying that the getter value is not defined for event target. So this is something we haven't quite spoken about just yet. When we get values through a stream, technically these values are typed. But this is something that's way more closely related to the HTML side of Dart, which is not relevant for us because we're really just concerned with Flutter. So to fix up this error message, I'm going to mark the type of event right here as just being dynamic, which essentially is going to tell Dart just like, hey, don't worry about the type issues here, just do your job. So if we now run this and try it out again, I'm going to type something in here, and then you can see, yep, we get the text out here. And you'll notice that for every event that comes through our stream, we see the entire value of the entire input. Okay, so good progress. Let's take a quick pause right here, and we'll continue in the next section.